hit me right in the left ear and drove me right into the wall, and I ricocheted off the wall. Get the fuck out of here, Jim.
I want to talk to you. You can't talk?
Go on.
Hey, I'm a man about it, Davey. I want to get I said,
Wait a minute, we'll talk. We'll talk.
mistake. I'm sorry.
You impatient little bat.
Made a mistake, Davey.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't do it on purpose.
We can't have that kind of mistake.
Well, you're using your mirror a lot, but that isn't
I
why I
wasn't
did
using a
it.
mirror. I'm running in a straight line right behind the guy in
That
front of
don't
me,
matter.
Jeff.
I'm sorry. I did not do it on purpose. That's all I can say. I know that isn't enough, but...
He carried fire in a way few drivers ever did. Davey Allison did not explode often, but when he did, everyone on pit road felt it. The helmets turned. The radios tightened. The entire garage knew something had pushed him past his limit. For a man raised in the Alabama gang, control was everything. You fought clean, you fought hard, and you never backed away from contact. But Davey was different from the old guard. He was smoother, sharper, and far less willing to accept being shoved out of the way. There was one afternoon at Pocono that revealed it better than words ever could. A chain reaction, a violent slide, a driver climbing out of a wrecked machine with a fury he tried to bury under years of discipline. Davey rarely showed rage publicly, yet those who were close to him said the same thing. His heat didn't come from ego, it came from pride. It came from the belief that respect on the racetrack was something earned, not taken. And there were rivals who broke that line. Drivers bumped him. Drivers blocked him. Drivers talked about him in the press. Most of the time, Davey let it go. He was a second-generation racer who understood the price of surviving in the Cup garage. But there was one man he never forgave, one driver who triggered something deeper, something sharper, something that never cooled down no matter how many laps they turned afterward. Why him? Why only him? Why did this one rival live rent-free inside Davey Allison's competitive soul? The answer takes us through glory, heartbreak, and collisions that shaped an era. But before we start, we need to remember who he truly was. Davey Allison was born on February 25, 1961, in Hoeytown, Alabama. The beating heart of what the sport later called the Alabama Gang. He grew up in a world where racing was not a hobby, not a pastime, but a language. His father, Bobby Allison, was already a giant of the sport, and Davey learned early that expectations could be both a blessing and a burden. But unlike many second-generation drivers, he never ran from the pressure. He absorbed it, shaped it, and used it to climb faster than almost anyone expected. He cut his teeth on short tracks where precision mattered as much as toughness. He developed a style that blended patience with sharp aggression. He didn't slam first, but he never backed down. When he entered the NASCAR Cup Series full-time, the garage immediately noticed how quickly he adapted. By 1987, he was Rookie of the Year. By the early 1990s, he was one of the most dangerous contenders on any oval, whether it was Daytona, Talladega, or Richmond. Davey Allison didn't win because others made mistakes. He won because he forced them into mistakes. His throttle control, his timing, and his instinct to find clean air in chaotic packs made him a threat every weekend. Yet inside that calm, composed exterior lived a competitor who demanded fairness. If he gave a man room, he expected the same. If he raced clean, he expected the same. And if someone crossed that line, the reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Success came quickly. A Daytona 500 victory, an all-star race win, and countless near misses in championship battles. But so did pressure. Rivals crowded him. Veterans tested him. Younger drivers pushed him. Through it all, Davey kept the same internal code. Respect first, aggression second, until the wrong driver reversed that equation. To understand why one man climbed to the top of the list of people Davey Allison truly hated more than anyone, we have to examine the battles that came before him. The clashes that shaped Davey's instincts. The confrontations that revealed exactly what he would and would not tolerate. Number 5. Dale Earnhardt, Sr. Davey Allison never feared Dale Earnhardt Sr., but he never trusted him either. No one in the garage did. Earnhardt raced by a different rulebook, one built on pressure intimidation and the belief that every inch of asphalt belonged to him until someone proved otherwise. Davey understood that style because he'd seen it his entire life, but understanding it didn't make it easier to live with. Their tension wasn't born from a single wreck or a single afternoon. It built slowly, lap after lap, moment after moment, as their careers kept colliding at the front of the field. Talladega was usually where it boiled over first. In the early 1990s, those two found each other in the draft more often than coincidence would allow. Davey tried to run his line clean. Earnhardt tried to move him out of it. Sometimes it ended with nothing more than angry glances on pit road. Other times it turned into radio static filled with frustration. Davey believed in racing a man the way he raced you. Earnhardt believed in winning by any means necessary. That philosophical split was enough to create constant friction. Their rivalry sharpened at Richmond, where tight corners magnified every bump. Earnhardt once rooted him up the track, a move the Intimidator considered routine. Davey didn't. He confronted Earnhardt later in the garage. No shouting match, no scene, just a cold sentence that told the whole story: respect me or expect me. It was one of the rare moments Earnhardt realized Davey wasn't a kid anymore. He was a threat. But for all their clashes, Davey didn't hate Earnhardt. Not truly. What he felt was a mixture of frustration and professional resentment. Earnhardt embodied an older, rougher era. Davey represented the next wave, a cleaner form of aggression. They pushed each other, cut each other, and tested each other's limits. The problem was simple. Davey wanted a fair fight. Earnhardt wanted the win. And whenever those two goals collided, the spark turned into something hotter. Still, Dale Earnhardt Sr. was not the man who lived deepest in Davey's anger. He was a rival, not a wound. And that distinction mattered. Number 4. Bill Elliott. Bill Elliott was everything Davey Allison respected in a competitor: quiet, precise, deadly fast on the right day. And that was exactly why their tension never exploded but never disappeared either. This was not a rivalry built on wrecks or shouting matches. It was built on pressure. Bill Elliott owned the superspeedways through the mid-1980s, and when Davey rose in the early 1990s, he had to fight for ground. Elliott once dominated without resistance. Talladega made the friction impossible to ignore. Elliott could carve through the air better than almost anyone, and Davey knew it. Drafting behind him felt like waiting for a mistake that would never come. Racing beside him felt like holding your breath through every corner. Elliott did not bump. He did not shove. He simply denied space. To a driver like Davey, who thrived on timing and taking clean openings, that quiet obstruction felt more infuriating than open aggression. Their real clash came when the media tried to build a storyline of old guard versus new guard. Elliott rarely engaged, but Davey did not appreciate hearing that he was the one disrupting tradition. He respected Elliott, yet he refused to be cast as the impatient kid trying to topple a legend. In private, Davey admitted that Elliott annoyed him because he made perfection look effortless. And when a man looks effortless at 200 miles per hour, it eats at you. There was one moment at Daytona when Davey finally voiced the frustration. Elliott blocked once. He blocked twice. On the third block, Davey lifted to avoid a wreck that would have taken half the field with them. After the race, he simply said that some drivers controlled the air too aggressively for the sake of survival. Everyone knew who he meant, even if he never said the name. Still, Davey did not hate Bill Elliott. He respected him too deeply. What burned was the feeling that Elliott always forced him into caution. Davey wanted to attack. Elliott forced him to wait. And for a driver built on momentum, nothing was more aggravating than hesitation. But Elliott was not the man who cut Davey the deepest. The next rival pulled emotion out of Davey that he rarely showed in public. Number 3. Ernie Irvan. Ernie Irvan was the kind of driver who made Davey Allison grit his teeth long before either of them said a word. Irvan was raw speed mixed with unpredictable decision-making. On his best days, he could run with anyone. On his worst days, he created chaos that everyone else had to survive. Davey respected courage, but he hated recklessness, and Irvan crossed that line more than once. Their tension grew fast. Michigan was the track that defined it. Davey was running strong, lining up a strategy that could have put him in victory lane. Irvan came in too hot through traffic and forced a chain reaction that ruined Davey's afternoon. No fight. No confrontation. Just a look on Davey's face that said everything. It was the look of a driver tired of paying for someone else's mistakes. Bristol made it worse. Irvan had a habit of diving into corners with confidence that sometimes exceeded grip. Davey expected tight racing, not blind aggression. When Irvan slid up into his lane and forced him into evasive moves that nearly wrecked them both, Davey lost patience. In the garage afterward, he told reporters that some drivers raced like they were alone on the track. Again, no name. But everyone knew. The media amplified the rivalry, painting Irvan as the wild card, and Davey as the man forced to clean up the damage. Irvan eventually admitted that he pushed too hard at times, but apologies did not erase the frustration Davey carried. He loved competing against sharp, disciplined rivals. Irvan was a coin toss. You never knew if he was going to win the race or ruin it. What bothered Davey most was simple. He could forgive aggression. He could forgive contact. He could not forgive unpredictability. Irvan took control away from him, and control was the foundation of Davey Allison's entire racing identity. Still, Irvan was not the man who lived in Davey's anger. There were drivers who made him furious, drivers who forced him into caution, and drivers who tested his patience. But the next man pressured Davey in a way that cut deeper than anything Irvan ever did. Number 2. Darrell Waltrip. Darrell Waltrip represented an era that Davey Allison was never fully part of, yet always had to fight against. Waltrip came from the generation of sharp tongues, sharp elbows, and sharper egos. He built his career on confidence that bordered on provocation, and he knew exactly how to get under another driver's skin without ever touching their car. Davey Allison was raised differently. In Hueytown, respect was earned with clean laps and hard work, not with headlines. That contrast set the stage for years of friction. Their rivalry began before Davey ever challenged for championships. As a young driver rising fast, Davey often found himself judged by Waltrip more harshly than others. Waltrip questioned his patience, questioned his approach, and occasionally questioned whether Davey relied too much on his last name. None of it sat well with Davey. He had fought through the short tracks, paid his dues, and earned every seat he ever had. Hearing a veteran undermine that effort struck a nerve. On the track, the tension showed in small moments. Waltrip closed doors early. Davey pushed them open. Waltrip expected deference. Davey refused to give it. At Bristol and Martinsville, where tempers lived inches from the wall, their battles often ended with one of them giving the other a stare that needed no explanation. The message from both sides was clear: "You are not above me." There was one radio exchange Davey never forgot. After a tight battle at Richmond left both drivers irritated, Waltrip made a comment implying Davey needed to learn the rhythm of cup racing. For a man who had already proven he belonged, it felt like a direct insult. Davey carried that frustration for months. Still, Davey did not hate Waltrip in the way the public sometimes assumed. What he hated was the feeling that he had to prove himself twice against men who talked louder than they drove. And Waltrip was the loudest of them all. But even Waltrip was not the man who triggered Davey Allison's deepest anger. One rival went further. One rival shook him in ways none of the veterans did. One rival stayed on his mind long after the checkered flags fell. Number 1. Geoff Bodine. Geoff Bodine was the only driver who genuinely got under Davey Allison's skin. Not through intimidation, not through power, through disruption. Bodine had a style that clashed with everything Davey believed racing should be. He defended harder than most. He blocked longer than most. And he made moves in traffic that forced Davey into situations he considered unnecessary and dangerous. Their rivalry did not flare once. It simmered for years. Short tracks were the first battleground. At places like Martinsville and North Wilkesboro, Bodine protected his line as if it were property. Davey could handle aggression. What he could not handle was a driver who refused to give an inch even when the situation demanded respect. The two made contact more than once, each incident adding another layer of tension. In the garage afterward, Davey rarely said Bodine's name. He did not have to. Everyone knew who he meant when he talked about drivers who pushed the limits of fairness. But the real hostility grew on the superspeedways. At Talladega and Daytona, Bodine had a habit of cutting air in ways that disrupted the entire field. Davey depended on rhythm, on reading runs with precision. Bodine broke that rhythm constantly. He made unpredictable pulls, sudden blocks, and defensive moves that forced Davey to lift. And for a driver like Davey, lifting in the draft felt like surrender. There was one moment at Daytona that defined their relationship. Davey had a run forming the kind that could shift the entire race. Bodine threw a late block, one that nearly triggered a multi-car crash. Davey saved the car, but afterward the anger was unmistakable. He confronted Bodine in private, not yelling, not threatening, but with a cold tone that revealed everything. He told him that there was a difference between racing to win and racing without awareness. Bodine brushed it off. Davey never forgot it. The frustration lingered because Bodine represented the one thing Davey could not control. A rival who raced against him rather than with him. A rival who broke the unwritten rules. Geoff Bodine was the only driver Davey Allison truly hated more than anyone. Not because of one moment, but because every moment with him felt like a fight for survival instead of a fight for victory. Larry McReynolds was not a rival in the traditional sense. He was Davey Allison's crew chief strategist and the man responsible for turning chaotic races into controlled victories. But that partnership came with friction, intense enough to shape both men. Davey did not hate Larry. He relied on him. Yet there were moments when the pressure between driver and crew chief felt sharper than anything happening on the track. Larry was meticulous. He believed in structure, data, and planning laps ahead. Davey was instinctive. He felt the car, the air, the traffic, and trusted his reactions. When those two approaches aligned, they produced some of the most powerful runs of the early 1990s. When they did not, tempers climbed fast. One of their most difficult afternoons came during a long green flag cycle at Michigan. Davey wanted track position and felt the car was strong enough to stretch the window. Larry insisted on pitting early to avoid a potential caution trapping them a lap down. Davey pushed back on the radio. Larry pushed harder. Each believed he was protecting the race. The conversation grew tense enough that the spotter briefly stepped in just to cool the temperature. Davey eventually followed the call, but the silence afterward said everything. This was a partnership that demanded precision from both sides, and when that precision cracked, emotion filled the gap. There were other moments, times when Larry's adjustments did not match Davey's expectations, times when Davey wanted more grip or more stability and felt his words were not understood quickly enough, times when Larry believed Davey was driving beyond the setup's limits. These were not arguments between enemies. They were arguments between men who carried the weight of winning for an entire team. What made their dynamic so powerful, and at times so volatile, was simple. Larry challenged Davey in ways no driver ever could. He questioned his patience. He questioned his judgment. He forced him to think instead of react. And Davey pushed Larry right back, demanding strategy sharp enough to match his talent. It was not hatred, it was heat. The kind only forged between two people who expected perfection from each other every single weekend. He challenged him in ways drivers never could. Davey Allison's career was defined by speed, courage, and a competitive fire that never dimmed even in the most difficult moments. He was born into pressure, raised in expectation, and molded by a sport that rarely forgives mistakes. Yet through all of it, he carried himself with a balance that few drivers ever mastered. He fought clean but hard. He respected the code of racing even when others ignored it. And he never backed down from confrontation when fairness was on the line. His rivalries did not weaken him. They sharpened him. Each opponent forced him to evolve. Dale Earnhardt's pressure made him tougher. Bill Elliott's precision made him smarter. Ernie Irvan's unpredictability made him more aware. Darrell Waltrip's commentary made him more determined. And Geoff Bodine, the man he truly hated more than anyone, revealed how deeply the integrity of competition mattered to him. Davey did not run from conflict. He used it. Every clash, every blocked run, every frustration pushed him toward greater clarity about who he was and what he demanded from the sport. Those tensions carved out a legacy that still stands today, a legacy built on honesty, talent, and the refusal to let anyone dictate his path. He was a racer shaped by rivalries, but never controlled by them. In remembering Davey Allison, we remember a man who chased victory with his whole heart and defended respect with his whole spirit. In NASCAR, some truths last longer than any checkered flag.